Hello everyone, this is Eddie in Atlanta, Georgia, radio call sign Whiskey Delta 3 Delta, and today I wanted to put together a short video discussing the 36-yard zero that a lot of people have sighted their rifles in because they like the idea of having a 0 to 300 yard spread that is very tight. But I'm here to tell you, if your sight over bore on your rifle is not exactly 2.25 inches, if it's another number, if it's taller, you're not going to get that tight spread of 0 to 300 yards. But I'm going to show you how you can do it. You're just going to have to zero at a different distance. And we've put together the targets and everything that you'll need to do that. The 36-yard zero became very famous from this video that Sean Ryan put together. And I just want to say thanks to Sean and send out kudos because it's a great video and everything he says in it is spot on. He very clearly states at the top of his targets that you have to have a rise over bore of, I think it's either I think he put 2.5 on the target. But what concerns me is there's a lot of people who are using higher rise over bore or sight over bore because of risers. They like a more comfortable position rather than being leaned over. You can put it on a riser, it'll raise your head up a little bit, and it's a more natural, repeatable position to shoot from. But those do not work at 36 yards if you're looking for a 0 to 300 inch spread. In this video, you can see here where Sean has indicated that this 36-yard zero, you can see he's got his zero here at 36 yards, it'll create a spread that is about roughly 6 inches from here to here. And it's true at 2.25. It's a great spot if you have a 2.25 inch rise of your sight over the bore of the rifle. But if you do not have that rise over bore, you're going to have to zero in at a different distance. And here are the distances that you'll need. If you look at a regular 36-yard zero, and it's a 5.56 round, all of this we've kept equal all the way across. So there's no windage or anything, just because we wanted to keep it consistent across each sight over bore. If you have a lower sight over bore, so let's say it's only 1.5 inches, this 0 to 300 yard spread that we have here, if you have 1.5 inch sight over bore, you're now going to have a 9.1 inch spread. The sweet spot, like I said, is about 2.25 inches if you want this great 5.9 inch spread. But let's say you're shooting a BCM or any AR, but you've got a unity riser below your EXP-S3 that's adding another inch to your already 2.5 inches. Well, now your sight over bore, and that's what I'm going to call this, is a SOB zero, sight over bore zero. Your SOB over zero is now going to be 3.5 inches because you're shooting with a riser. Well, now if you zero in at 36 yards, you're looking at over a foot spread in this 0 to 300 yard range. If you have a Hellion, for example, with a tall optic on top of it, you may be as high as 4.5 yards for your sight over bore. If that's the case and you're zeroing in at 36 yards, you now have a almost a 2-foot spread of that 0 to 300 yards. So instead of 0 to 300 being about this tall, 0 to 300 is now this tall, which could very easily put you off or cause you to miss or something to that effect. So what I've done is I've gone through and in all of the ballistics for the round, I've compared them across the board, and in that comparison, what you'll find is if you're shooting at a 2.5 inch sight over bore, you really need to be zeroing your rifle at 40.75 yards. And that's what's going to give you this 5.9 inch spread. And remember that number, 5.9. That is the most compressed point on a 5.56 trajectory, and it only occurs once along that trajectory. And based on what your sight over bore is going to depend on where that 5.9 occurs along the trajectory. So what I would like to do is we need to think more in terms of what is your sight over bore versus what is, 36 yard zero. That 36 yards is not constant. For example, the 3.5 inch sight over bore, you need to be zeroing your rifle at 61 yards if you want to get this 5.9 inch spread. My Hellion is currently at a 4.5 inch sight over bore. This occurs at 82.25 yards for the zero to be able to get into that range. So rather than, and that's what concerns me, if I read comments where people say, I sight in all my rifles at 36 yards because I want that tight. Unless all of your rifles have exactly a 2.25 inch sight over bore, then you're going to be wildly off on your other rifles. Let's just look at the BCM for a second. Let me go ahead and shut that down, and let's look at the BCM. When you look at the ballistics for the BCM, it has, oops, sorry. You just X out of that. It has a sight over bore of 3.5 inches. And if I were to sight the BCM at 36 yards with that 3.5 inches, my spread would be over a foot. Now, if you keep working down through the ballistics, you can see at 50, it gets lower. At 60, it gets lower. But at 61 yards, you get into a sweet spot here. So when you're talking about the 5.56 round, always keep in mind 5.9 to 5.8 is really the most compressed. And when I say compressed, I'm talking about this range from 0 to 300 yards. That spread gets most compressed at either 5.9 or 5.8 inches. So that is the sweet spot. That's where you need to be. So if you have a 3.5 inch sight over bore, you need to be sighting your rifle in at 61 yards to be able to get that yardage. Let's do another example. Let's go ahead and let me close out of that. And let's look at the Hellion. And it is a little bit different. This rifle has a 4.5 inch sight over bore. And if I were to sight it in at 36 yards, guess what? I now have a 0 to 300 spread of almost 2 feet, this spread right here. If you work through across the ballistics at 50 yards, it goes down to 11.2. At 70 yards, it goes down to 7.1. The sweet spot for a 4.5 inch SOB or sight over bore that gets you into that 5.8 to 5.9 range is going to be 85.25 yards. So that's where you need to be. That's where you need to be sighting the rifle to get that really sweet compressed range. So the next thing is what I've done is I've gone through and actually created targets for each one of these sights over bore, and they're going to be available on our website. And in fact, they're actually there now, so they're absolutely free. And what I've done is I've gone through and I've taken each sight over bore number that you see here for each distance. And obviously the first one, 2.5, well, you're going to be starting out at a negative 2.5. The 3-inch, you're obviously going to be starting out at a negative 3-inch. 3.5 inch, you're going to start out at a negative 3.5 inch. You get the picture. 36 yards cannot be consistent if you're starting at a different location along the trajectory. So each one of these are available at the site, and the site, if you want to download the targets, is at Whiskey Delta or WD3D.live. And then once you go there at the very top, you'll see SOB Zero at the top. Another important thing, the first step that you need to do when you're putting this together is you need to determine your sight over bore for your particular rifle. And let's see here. The way you do that is, it's very easy. It's not hard to do. Let me just go ahead and put it all on this camera so you can see it better. On my BCM here, just take your measurement and put it in the center of the sight, and on the EOTech, it's actually looks like kind of like the last line on that, and then measure it to the center of the bore right here. And for the BCM, it's 3.5 inches. It's on a 1-inch unity riser, so it would normally be 2.5. The Hellion is different. This one, I've got a Swamp Fox CQB sight on it, and to the center of the bore on this one is 4.5 inches. So once you do that, mark it somewhere on your, get a Sharpie or something and mark it on your rifle. That way you always know the hold for that particular rifle, and it's always there for you. The next thing is, if you go to our site, it'll walk you through the steps of setting this up for your particular rifle along with the targets. And very simply, just start by, number one, determine each of your rifles sight over SOB, sight over bore, and then what you want to do is you want to go to this this second chart here, and you can see each one of the sights over bore and the target distance that you need to be using. So a 3.5 is going to be a 61-yard target, and that's going to produce your again, that magic number, 5.8, 5.9, somewhere in that range. If you're there on a 5.56, you're as compressed as you can be. That's the tightest gap that you can get. And continuing to go down, get that out of the way. There's all the data for the EXPS3 on the Unity riser, and you can have a look at that and kind of get an idea of what the yardage is. There's a Swamp Box, and here are the targets that I've created for whatever SOB you have, sight over bore. So for example, let's just look at one of these. Let's go down and look at the 3.5 inch sight over bore target, and I'm just going to bring it here. Obviously, at 3.5 inches, your starting position is obviously going to be a negative 3.5, and with these targets, you can either shoot them for a 3.5 inch SOB. You can shoot them at 61 yards if you're at an outdoor range, but I've also optimized these for 20 yards. If you only have access to an indoor range, then you can aim here and impact here if it's 20 yards, aim here, impact here if it's 61 yards. But the cool thing is, I've actually gone through, and for each one of these targets, I've placed where your 5.9-inch trajectory is going to be, so that on one piece of paper you've got not only your zero spot, your zero distance, but you've also got a reference for all of your holds whenever you're learning. So if you learn this target, then you're going to know precisely where you need to be. And it's true not just for this target. If you go down, same thing on the 4-inch, the 4.5-inch is the same way. You can see they slightly change. On the 4.5-inch, you've got 3 locations above the horizontal line. If you go all the way up to the, let's see, there's the 2.5-inch, you've got 6 of the, so you're going to have to learn your specific SOB target depending on what your rise over bore is here for your SOB. And then once you get used to it, like I said, if you write your SOB on each one of your rifles, you'll know which one of these targets and which one of these holds for each one of your rifles is going to work in your particular situation. So the last thing that I want to talk about is I recommend getting a rangefinder just to practice this. And the reason is you can go out and you can look at something with your eyes and say, okay, that looks like 75 yards. And then you can come over here and, you know, take your rangefinder, put the rangefinder on it, see how far it actually is, and then come over here and look at your target and see, you know, how far off you. So you're really getting to know your visual ability to determine how far something is versus how far it actually is on the rangefinder, and then where does that correlate on this one piece of paper where you've got a 5.9-inch spread that's got you covered from 0 to 300. Additionally, by the way, I went ahead and in the lower left-hand corner, if you look down here, I put in your other yardages for you out to 350 to 500 so that you'll know out to 500 yards how much drop you're going to have in the bullet. And again, this load is a federal load. And also, I just want to take a moment to say thank you not only to Sean Ryan for his original video. I also want to thank Federal Ammunition for their ballistics calculator on their website, which I used quite a bit to go through and put all of this together. So the big thing is practice this right here. Right there. Look with your eyes, guess the distance, then measure it with your rangefinder, and then see how far off those two are, and then come over and compare that to your SOB target over here to find out where you were, and just practice that. Just keep each day, just practice that until you get better at picking out various things with various distances. So that's pretty much it. If anyone has any questions, for those of you that are radio licensed, my email address is correct on QRZ. Send me an email if you have any questions. If anybody else who is not licensed and doesn't have access to QRZ, use the contact button on my website here and contact me. If you need for me to make you a custom target based on your SOB distance, I'll be happy to do that. I'll put that together for you. Or if you have any other questions, just contact me through the website. So I hope this has been helpful, and everybody have a great day. And as we say in ham radio, 7-3, we'll catch up with you soon.